Perfect. All right.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure on behalf of Holliston's Historical Commission to welcome you on this rather soggy afternoon to our historic town hall and central burying ground.
Yep.
I'm the commission chair, Sara Zarrelli. It's really wonderful to see this turn out despite the dreadful weather.
Right, yeah.
We will be working actively to think about how we can best keep ourselves dry and comfortable throughout this.
Yeah.
But before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to highlight the role of the commission in the town, which really is to serve as a regulatory body and as one that really helps advocate for the special places in town. And one of our big efforts in the last couple years has been doing a lot of restoration work on the town's cemeteries. We're very grateful to receive funding from the Community Preservation Act Fund that paid for this work and has completed work in all of the cemeteries across town. And today we're going to share with you the work that's taken place in Central Street. So I would encourage us to be friends this afternoon and to come under the shelter that we have as the rain comes down. And it is my pleasure to turn this over to James Keast, who wears two hats as the town's facility manager and also member of the Historical Commission, who's done a tremendous job overseeing the restoration work on both behalf of the commission and the town.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
So welcome everyone. As Sara had mentioned, I don't know if people want to get under or not. I'm James Keast. I work for the town, but I also live in town. I've lived in the town for over 20 years. Was a full member of the Historic Commission and now an adjunct.
The website hasn't been corrected.
Okay.
I need to send Chris a note.
So it's a little bit of background. The town has 5 historic cemeteries. The Central Cemetery, which is here where we're at today. The East Holliston Cemetery, which is over past the intersection of High and Woodland Street. The South Cemetery, which is way at the other end of town, that's across from Hopping Brook Park. The North Cemetery, which is off of Cedar Street, and then the West Cemetery, which is off of Gorwin Drive on the western part of town. So in 2023, it was actually the select board approached me and said, you know, a number of these cemeteries are in pretty bad shape. We'd like you to look into, getting them restored or fixed. And working closely with the CPC, it was decided that, you know what, the best course of action for these cemeteries is a preservation. And preservation meaning that we want to fix the broken stones, the stones that are leaning, the ones that have been buried over years of dirt and grass. We want them dug up and repaired. But we don't want to bring these things to pristine, brand new condition because we want to maintain the weathered charm that these stones have undergone for the past few hundred years. Just to give you some data, there are 1,056 gravestones in town. This cemetery here, the Central Cemetery, has 659. East Holliston has 103. The Old North Cemetery off of Cedar Street is 105. South Cemetery has 56. And the West Cemetery has 133. Wow. Which is surprising.
That's surprising.
That there's a lot in that small cemetery. So in 2023, with very generous grant funds, $500,000 from the CPC, the town went out to bid for services to preserve the cemetery. So whenever you're using public funds, which these CPC funds are, the identification of a contractor to do that work has to be done in an open and public forum. And that means you go out through a formal bid, contractors submit their cost for this part of the project in a sealed envelope. And there's actually a formal opening. You're all in a room, you open up each of the envelopes and you see who comes in with the best price. And the technical term is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Responsible is one that is capable of doing this work. So say if someone comes in who's a carpenter and they submit the lowest bid, they're technically not responsible because they really don't have the experience to preserve gravestones. And then responsive, meaning that they provided all the appropriate information for the bid. So we went through that process. We selected a company called Village Green Restoration, not to be confused with the company that's here in town, completely separate. But Village Green was awarded the contract, and over the course of 2 years, went through systematically to each of these cemeteries and began their preservation work. The first step basically was to identify which of the stones needed attention. And when I mean stones, I also mean the headstones as well as some footstones. A lot of these graves have footstones. And again, some of the numbers, we have 659 graves here, 650 were touched. I mean, that's just to give you an idea. On the East Holliston Cemetery, 6 were broken, 17 fallen, 4 had sunken in the ground, 38 were leaning, 17 were covered in heavy moss and lichen. On the North Cemetery, there was 9 broken, 3 fallen, 3 sunken, 28 leaning, and 97 covered in moss and lichen. Wow. At the South Cemetery, there were 12 broken, 12 fallen, 2 sunken, 40 leaning. And then in the West Cemetery, 13 broken, 13 fallen, 18 sunken, 42 leaning, and 115 covered in moss and lichen. Wow. So the process was obviously to identify all the stones that had the issues. And then it started out basically surveying what's existing. So they photo documented everything, they surveyed everything, what they could read off of the stones. They documented, which at some point we probably want to verify that against what the Historic Commission, or Historical Society has on their records. And then they systematically went, and each stone that was damaged or leaning, they dug around. They actually took the stones out of the ground, created a proper footing for the stone, righted the stone. There are a number of the markers that have bases. A number of the bases were tilted or had moved over the years on the soil. They took those bases out. I have some pictures I can send around. They created a proper foundation, much like you would do like if you're building a house. Compacted the soil, compacted gravel, set the base on that, and then righted the stone on top of that. Wow. A number of the stones were cracked and broken. That involved finding the pieces, right? Sometimes they're fortunate, a piece may be laying right next door, but they'd actually dig around within a perimeter around the stone, and they were quite fortunate to find the actual remnants of the stone. They would clean the areas where the break was on the, sort of the existing stone and the broken piece on the top. They would drill small holes in both ends of the stone and install carbon fiber rods, dowel rods, in between, and then they would put an epoxy in between and actually glue the stones back together. And so they did that obviously on a number of stones throughout town. And it's, and they're obviously it hasn't been that long, but we've had a few storms and they're holding up well. So that's a good sign. Lots of rain as well, and we haven't seen anything tip. And so that was it from sort of the mechanical repair. The other thing that we wanted to do was clean the stones. And there are sort of varying levels of what we could have done to clean the stones. One is sort of a light mechanical cleaning. We take a brush and scrape off the moss and lichen and the dirt. There's another approach that's a little more aggressive where you could use a chemical to clean it off. And then there's the full out, really dig in there and scrape everything out. But with some of the softer stones, there's some actually sandstone markers there, you would actually damage the stone by being too rough with it. So the Historic Commission decided the best way to clean these stones is with a light mechanical cleaning, maybe a little bit of water. There were a couple stones in marble, actually, some of the monuments that the contractor did come to us and say, hey, I can apply a little more aggressive chemical cleaning to these, and it won't damage the stone or the marble. So that would be our recommendation. So we did do that on a select few. But you'll walk through here and you'll see, hopefully you see everything's pretty straight. There shouldn't be anything broken, and you should be able to read the stones. Some of them, and again, the slate that might have had lichen on it, which really gets into the little grooves and the layers, they kind of left it alone because their concern is that could actually break off segments of the stone. So that's basically what was done. So I don't know if there are any questions.
Well, you brought the sunshine out.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, right. It's all my hot air.
Yeah.
Keep the numbers of how many buried here and how many got fixed.
So there's 659 stones here, and 650 were touched. Yeah, a significant number. This was by far the most work. But I do have these, and I don't know, we can hand them around, but just to give you an idea of what they had done, and I can send these to you. In terms of the base, so this base would go in here. They literally took it out, reset the foundation. Some of these others, and I'll pass this around. You can see here all the items are marked, the footstones, and they would literally. There were some markers in here. They would dig them all out and create a proper foundation for them to set in. And then this picture, this isn't this cemetery, this is the South Cemetery, but this really gives you an indication of what we were dealing with initially. Granted, this cemetery was in the best physical condition, but if you look at the condition of that cemetery, and that's no way to treat the cemetery. So if you get a chance to go over to the South Cemetery, it's like a transformation.
That's the one that had trees taken down.
Yes, so every one of these, that's a good point, thanks. Every one of these cemeteries had trees growing in various areas. Some trees had sort of enveloped stones. The decision was to leave it as is. If the stone could be moved, if it was close enough to the tree without damaging the tree, the stone was dug up and moved over a foot. But if you go to some of these cemeteries, you'll see a stone just sticking out of the side of the tree. That was just left. It decided not to do that. As you can see from that one picture, just a lot of brush and ground cleanup was done, and a number of the smaller sapling trees were removed. And a lot of the dead trees. There are a lot of dead trees in the area, especially the East Holliston Cemetery had a number of dead trees and clump trees. We systematically pulled out the dead ones, and it's made a great improvement.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the 9 that they didn't work on were in the best condition?
Yes.
So
yes.
they didn't need any?
They didn't need any attention. That's correct.
Wow.
Do you want me to talk about the Miller Claflin tomb, or are you going to do that?
Oh, I think you better, yeah.
Well, you were the one.
Oh, wait a minute. If you want to talk about Miller, I'd rather talk about Claflin.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So as part of the South Cemetery project, there is a tomb there. And
Hopping Brook. Up in Hopping Brook.
across from
Hopping
Hopping
Brook,
yes. And it's under some debate. We'll let Joanne manage this
All
case.
right, I'll handle that part of it,
Of who's actually
in there, yeah.
But
or was in there.
was in there. But the front facade of that tomb was pulling away and actually exposed, the insides of the tomb. The Historic Commission, a couple years ago on a cold January day, went in there with a camera trying to see what we could find. And it was decided that, the face of this tomb needs to get repaired. And so as part of this preservation project, and with funding from the CPC, we found a contractor through the same procurement process to restore the front of that tomb. And they did an amazing job. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to see how it came out. But, when it was taken down, it gave us the opportunity to peek in.
Yeah.
And I'll let Joanne talk about
the
what she found in there. With a former commissioner, Ben Clarkson, went in there and actually found a number of bone fragments. And as they cleaned out the bottom of the tomb, they found out that it was brick lined, much like this. It was actually very beautiful
inside. It was gorgeous inside.
They cleaned it out,
Yeah.
They took the remains. They actually put them all together to try to see what was what,
Yeah.
and then reinterred them back in when everything was
Yes.
sealed up. And I know I won't get the story
Oh,
right, but it's the story of the
That's
previous
okay.
century's
Yes.
youth went in there and broke in it. What was
Yes,
the year?
1876.
1876.
A few,
I'll let you talk about it.
yes, a few young men who were coming back from Milford were in their cups. And they broke into the tomb, which I have a feeling it was probably fairly easy to get into at that time anyway. And according to the report, it said that they had taken the bones of Mr. William Claflin out and brought them home as trophies of sorts. So they were arrested, and they had to pay for their crime, which was, I think it was a fine mostly. But anyway, the controversy has come up mainly about Jacob Miller. Quite frankly, we don't know where Jacob Miller is truly buried. He seems to go here and there. In the records that we have, some of them say that he is there, some of them say that he's in West, and you know what? He could even be buried over here. He could be. Several other of his compadres are buried there too. We're not really sure. Now, up at the West Cemetery is where a lot of his relatives are buried, and it is only logical that he might be there because he lived just up the road a little bit. So, but we're not sure because every record that we look at either gives us confusion or just adds to the mystery. And it's really, really annoying because he is one of our greatest Revolutionary War heroes, and we can't figure out where he is exactly. Now, the 1876 story said that the William Claflin bones were taken out. Now, if you do make a trip up there, you can do a little bit of your own investigation. For instance, there's a lovely marble memorial stone in the front of it, and in it says built 1825, referring to the tomb. Now, it has all these names on it. All of them are in there, had died after 1825, so we can handle that. Now, Jacob Miller died in 1812. So unless there was another tomb before that that we don't even know about, we still don't know where Jacob Miller was buried. And it really is annoying. It keeps me up at night.
I'm sure it does.
It does.
It does. So you had mentioned that the kids had grabbed a skull.
They took a skull, yes, and apparently it was tossed back in there.
Well,
there you go.
Here's the story about the skull. When they were dismantling the front of that tomb, mortared in the wall was the skull.
Yes. I know.
And so,
such a
the
sad
skull is
ending
now
to the
back
bones.
inside the tomb with the rest of the remains.
right.
But that was one of the things. So as they were chipping away the stones, you can imagine that the gentleman working on this project was, whoa.
Now, we don't know. We don't even know whether that skull belongs to the other bones that were found.
Yeah.
We really don't know. We did put the bones carefully and with great reverence into a lovely antique wicker basket. So we felt very good about that, at least, and it is in there. So we really don't know. It does bother me a great deal to figure out where Jacob Miller is. But there's a lot of other little mysteries and confusions too, because I figured that Ephraim Littlefield, the father, was buried up at South, rest of the family. I found a stone out here that is apparently him. What's he doing down here, you know? I mean, that's the fun of going through this graveyard and visiting all these people. And I mean, it is really a lot of entertainment. Now, what I want to say is that in this cemetery, as well in all the others, we know many of the stories of these people here, such as Jacob Miller, wherever he is, but we also don't know a lot of other stories. We're always finding out new stories about the people that are here. And why is that important? Well, if you drive by and get stopped in traffic, perhaps now you will just gaze a little bit more over to the side and think about all the people that are here, all the lives that they led. And why are we here today? Well, it is also to commemorate the preservation that was done. But there's also a greater thing that we should be looking at. Now, what I want to tell you about, though, is about the Netherlands American Cemetery and Memorial that is located in Margraten, Holland. Why? Well, that's a military cemetery for World War II, and there are 10,000 American soldiers buried there. Now, they're far away from home. People would have to go a long way to go and visit the graves there. But the villagers of Margrat in Holland have all taken it upon themselves to, to take on one of the burial sites there, keep it nice and neat, and also to commemorate them and to keep up the memory of the person that is buried there. They don't have a familial connection there, but they do have a very close relationship to it. And also that they understand that it is very important to remember these people that are buried there. This is what we also want to do here. Not only are there a number of Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried here, there are some Civil War soldiers. There are other people that are buried here that may not have been soldiers, but they're also, they participated in the war effort. You know, what about the women? You know, we're finding some very interesting stories that tell us a lot about how the women were considered. A lot of times their stories are really, really masked up by either culture or just that people just listen to them as if they don't have a voice. But we do find out that while the soldiers were off fighting the wars, what were they doing at home? They were supporting the war effort, and we have many stories and are uncovering even more about what the women were doing. And that not only means about what they were doing for the Revolutionary War, but for Civil War and for the subsequent wars. They were doing such things during the Revolution as gathering up supplies, making clothes, knitting socks. We have a knitter in here. We have her gravesite here, a knitter for the Civil War era. And I go by every time and give a little tip of my hat to her because on the death record in the town records, very rarely would they list anything about women other than maybe housekeeper, housewife, if at all. But on hers in 1862, she managed to get in a word on her occupation, and it was knitter. Think about that. What was she knitting for? Of course, this is 1862 Civil War. They were also doing this in the Revolutionary War as well. Now, we had soldiers that were going off to war, but there was a large number of people still at home that were supporting the troops. And we're going to meet a few of them. They may not have had a uniform on, or they may not have marched, but they were here in Holliston keeping track of the money, sending out money, doling out supplies, and managing it from afar. The war could not have been won without the people who were at home doing those things in support of the troops. And we'll point out a few of them as we go around and make sure that, yes, we do honor the soldiers. You will see the flags flying here, but you know, maybe some of those flags should be moved a little closer between the man and his wife who was supporting the war effort at home. And without them, they would not have won. Now, if you would like, we could go and maybe take a look, you know, hopefully, I don't like that cloud over there, but you know, we might not get terribly far in it, but yeah, how are you doing as far as moving?
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Okay, all right. Well, all right, then I think what we should do is we have a couple of very conveniently located Holliston prominent people, and why don't we take a walk over there and visit a few of them. James, I think I heard this story, which does lend sort of an expansive view of the cemetery here. So please do tell.
So, as you can see, the cemetery is around us. This building, which was built in 1856,
Yeah, 56, 57, right? Yeah, it took them a few years. You know.
was built after the cemetery was placed here.
Yes.
And in 2000, it underwent a renovation. They ran in power off the utility pole, came down through here to this transformer, and made its bend over here to the side of the building.
Yeah.
And when they were digging the trench that we're standing on right here, they found bones.
Yes.
And someone was found. I don't know if you've identified that person.
I don't think we have.
Okay.
Yeah. But when the cemetery it extended all the way to the driveway over
Yes,
there.
so
It did. Yeah.
To give so a little bit more history.
Yeah.
In right around the same time actually as this cemetery project, the septic system for Town Hall had to get replaced.
Oh, yes.
And so we were looking all around. There isn't much land.
There's no place
One
to
of
put
the
it.
areas that we were considering were these 2 green areas on either side of the monument. But knowing that someone was buried here, we thought, you know what, we better check over here. So we had a company come that did ground penetrating radar. And they
what did he
scanned this
find?
area where there are actual graves to just sort of get a signature.
Yeah.
Then they scanned over here. And if you take these rows and continue them down this way,
Yeah.
sure is saying
Yeah, right.
there are people buried.
Yes, that's right.
11 people actually buried in this area here in front of Town Hall.
Yeah. Yes.
So of course I got right on the phone
absolutely,
to the Mass Historic Commission. What do? You know, we have these graves unmarked in front of our Town Hall. They said, happens all the time. And don't do anything. We'd rather you not put a
Don't
septic
put it
system
there, yeah, right, yeah.
And, got a land easement with the church, so it's sitting over across the street there.
Yeah.
But I said, well, what do we do? Do we want to not have people walk on it? What's the best approach? She says, you know what? We look at cemeteries as parks. We
Yes,
encourage
yes.
people to come,
That's right,
reflect,
yeah.
sit, walk, put down a blanket. It says do nothing.
That's right.
Send us the information. So at the Mass Historic Commission in Boston, they have that radar scan marking the locations of the graves, and so that's it. So next time you walk through here, you realize, you know what? There are some people buried out right in front.
Tell me what you found in the front corner of the church when you did
Oh, yes. So the old meeting house, it was originally, and there's actually a marker over by the church, by where that blue car is, was the old meeting house. When we did the scan for over here, we had them scan over on the other side because who knows what could be over there. And fortunately, where the leaching field was going to go, or is, there was nothing. But over on the left-hand side are old foundation layouts of the old meeting house.
Yes. And in 1890, when they were putting in the water main on Washington Street, guess what they found right out in front here?
Bones.
Yeah. More graves. More graves. So, tread very lightly as you're going southbound on Washington Street, like these people are, that you are passing over perhaps a few extras that were there. Yeah. The laying out of the graveyard was one of just about the first thing that they did. Even before they got the meeting house up, they immediately mapped out exactly where this was going to be. So this is like the first thing that they did. Yeah. So, and the thing is, unfortunately, probably a lot of the oldest graves were in that part that we now have the town hall sitting on.
Right.
Yes. So that's what happened. Now, somebody that I think I would like to go visit, we're going to go over here. He's one of my favorite people. And I think he does need a gentle facelifting. I think this is the Venerable, the very great Deacon Phipps. And we do find his name listed on the soldiers that were ready to go for the French and Indian War. He was not a soldier during the time of the Revolutionary War, but he had another extremely important job. And he was the one who handled all of the money, doling out to the right people, bringing in the money, getting things sent out. He was the town treasurer. There were some years where he was treasurer, moderator, a selectman, all at the same time, because after all, how many people have we got for all the jobs that were listed? But he handled them all. And sometimes they would circulate through, depending on who was doing what, but he handled the money. Now, also a little bit of history is that he was also the treasurer of the church, because remember back in the 18th century, there was no town-church separation, it was all in one. So all the money was flowing through in one direction. He was handling it all. I suppose that's why he's got the deacon there too, but also, unfortunately, he didn't list all of his other jobs, which would have fit on the stone. But there's another little twist to him that kind of makes me smile a little bit, because he has one thing on his stone that you don't find on hardly any stones at all. I can only think of two, one being him and another one further up the line, which lists the cause of death. All right, so died October 18, 1792 of the smallpox. Now, why would he list that on there? I mean, is that the greatest thing that, you know, his legacy? Instead of being the treasurer and the selectman and there, you know, all that marvelous stuff that he did. Well, according to an early historian of Holliston, he contracted smallpox when a friend stopped by with a bundle of clothing that was infected with the smallpox virus, and that apparently that's how he contracted it. So another thing that keeps me awake at night is wondering, gee, if his friend did not die of the smallpox himself, would he come by and look at that stone and think about whether or not he was the cause of Aaron Phipps's death? But it kind of is sad, because you look at that and you only think of the smallpox, but no, he was at the forefront of keeping the war effort going in Holliston. The money, you see him through the town records, page after page, of all of the jobs that he was concerned with, which I think is a much better legacy, really, than saying that he simply died of smallpox. It's the only one. It's kind of sad. Now,
Do you think he would have been of like sound enough mind and body? Why no one wanted to deal with him because he had smallpox? Or,
right.
Like who
Said that, yes,
decided
yeah.
this is what goes on the stone? Do you have
Was it the
any
family?
record of that?
No, you really wouldn't. But most likely the family had a lot to do with it, because they are the ones that are getting the stone made and all of that. And what do you want to put on it? That is the big question too. And what I want to also point out, that not only is this a cemetery with names and people and all, but also the cemetery here is also filled with art and poetry. If you go all around all these stones, you will find at most of them, down at the bottom, there'll be a little bit of an inscription there. And also at the top, there's marvelous artwork that's all through here. And I hope that we do get to one stone. We'll find a few of them down in that area there, of a certain carving. It's a winged effigy, just as this one is here, but it's even more whimsical and sprightly. And it was likely done by a local stone carver, Joseph Barber, who lived in Medway. And the current owners of that property, actually, the cellar of their barn, pieces of stone, and a few broken pieces, maybe a few samples and all, but it was a lot with the same styles that he is also credited with. So let's go visit somebody else. We do have over here, of course, his son, Lieutenant Aaron Phipps, but he actually did serve while father was at home doling out the money. And we're gonna go, let's stop up at this one over here. Yeah. This is a good one, a good example, because you can actually read the poem at the bottom. It's not likened over. And not only that, speaking of poetry, that stone has one of the classic ones that you will find everywhere. Apparently you would go to the stone carver and everything, and he probably had a catalog or something. What would you like to have? Well, here's a few suggestions and a few of the popular ones. And the one that you see here is just about the most popular one that you will see everywhere. So what it says is, "Behold and see as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me." Isn't that really uplifting? But this one you will find everywhere. And I imagine it must have been near the front of the catalog book when they were doling them out. So, all right, now down here we also see another little bit of art. Did anybody happen to get Captain Daniel Ames? Now this is a really nice it's a reproduction stone. Don't really know where it was, but you do. All right, here you go. This is a great reproduction where you have the tree and the urn, which was very popular. I think that was one of the stones that you could get even pre-made. But yeah, Daniel Ames. The thing is, apparently he was born in Hopkinton, lived in Holliston, and I imagine that is why he is here. All right, over to here. Now that's Reverend Prentice, who was the minister in Holliston at the time of the Revolution. And as you can see, he made it just beyond. He died in 1788. And you find all through the records where Aaron Phipps was managing the money that would be going to the soldiers and the supplies and all that. And then every now and then it would say that money would go to Reverend Prentice and also so many cords of wood and other things. And so that would be mixed in with the rest of the doings that were printed in town records. Now there is one right here talking about poetry and art. All right. Nancy Dickinson is the daughter of the third minister. She died at the age of 16. And if you notice on here, it's a very stone, and it has no poetry on it, which is rather sad. But this is what her father said. Come on, turn the page. He made a comment about it in his diary, and he said, "My mind greatly exercised on a tender subject, whether it be proper to have any lines at the bottom of Nancy's monument as an epitaph. If proper, what? I thought of nothing that would or could express what was already in my mind. I finally sent to the stonecutter to have no epitaph." In his diary, he wrote several pages about her dying. It was very long and very heartfelt, and that really reflects, the feelings that he had. So I think about that when we go by and look at that and realize, how much heartbreak there was all through here. All of the that are buried, first wives, second wives, sometimes in a long list. So now, right down here. Now, this is a really good description, of being unable to read the stone. And so, maybe if we work a few bits of lichens off it, but it's still in very delicate condition. This is the stone, and it says, "To Ephraim Littlefield, who died in 1778. Yeah, all right. So the thing is, I was kind of surprised to find him here. And I'm going, this can be, Well, now he has a post here. And when you look in the records, he was one of many of the Holliston men who went on what I suppose to be a military excursion down to Rhode Island, and they would spend 7 days because there would be an alarm, no fighting, no nothing, 7 days down, and then they have to walk back home. But they get paid for walking back home, which was pretty good. But there's another dilemma with it too. Ephraim Littlefield, the father, and there's Ephraim Littlefield Jr., who is buried at the South Cemetery. Both of them have these posts, lovely flags and all that. Both of them pretty much, that's what their war record was. But one of them, or both, it's another thing we're unsure of, are on the list of Holliston's Tories. Ephraim Littlefield, Jr. in particular, but Ephraim Littlefield, the father, apparently was roughed up on the road while he was going back to his home up at what is Littlefield Tavern. So the thing is that 1 week of an excursion down to Rhode Island gets you a marvelous post and flag.
What were they doing in Rhode Island?
Well, the thing was that at one point the British were they were all hanging out in Bristol and Newport. And the thing is that there was also one thing that I found in the town records was what was called the secret expedition. I had no idea what it was. I asked Frank about it. You know, we're still looking up details on it. But the secret expedition, there were several soldiers from Holliston that took part in that. And it's also called the Spencer Expedition as well.
77.
Yeah, it's,
Abortive attempt to attack British troops at Newport.
yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately, they got the troops all assembled down there.
Yeah.
And discovered that, in fact, the secret expedition is no longer secret.
so much for secrets.
Daniel Eames was on the secret.
There you go. Daniel Eames was on The Secret. Yeah, yeah. No, not so secret anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Liz, you don't know what it was.
That's right. It's a secret. You can find some details about it. If you Google it, you'll find a little bit about it. But apparently, still a lot of it's a secret. But a lot of what the Minuteman soldiers in Holliston were involved in. On April 19, 1775, and it says in the records that they answered the alarm, two companies went to Cambridge and one went to Boston Neck, also known as either Roxbury, Dorchester, in that area, Boston Neck. And Boston Neck, if you remember the poem, Paul Revere, remember? One if by land and two if by sea. Well, the one if by land would have been that the troops were going out through Boston Neck. So, of course, everything was all done. And one question I do get is, okay, did they leave exactly from here on April 19th and go? Well, there was a relay system of riders that would come out and would announce the alarm all the way out as far as even Holliston to let them know that the alarm. Now, what the exact time was, whether it was on April 19th in the morning, afternoon, or the next day, well, you know, who knows? Because how would they get from Holliston to Cambridge and Boston Neck? Well, yes, that's right. It was by feet. I was kind of hoping that maybe some of them would get a bit of a ride on a wagon, but I never found anything that said so. And the thing is, they would get there and they would cover the areas that they were assigned. Some of them would stay, but a lot of them would come back, and then they would be going on those expeditions down to Rhode Island. We spent a lot of time going to Rhode Island. so that was kind of like the area that we were assigned to. And when you think about it, we are at the very bottom of Middlesex County. We're about as close as anybody in Middlesex County could be to go to Rhode Island. So we would end up there. But there were other ways that they would, also augment other troops. And also there was a very complex system about hiring of soldiers. You would go out and find somebody and you would pay him, and he would end up in one of the companies, even in Holliston. And also many people were obligated to go find somebody that you could hire to go into the Continental Army. There was a whole system, and it was very complex. It was very complex. So,
Share with us why people didn't want to fight.
well, yes, not fine. Well, now among the 5 Tories that were listed, 4 of them ended up on these little 1-week excursions to Rhode Island, and it covered them for posterity. One did not, and I had wondered why. I thought maybe he was infirm, maybe he died, or whatever. But yes, there were several of them where you would hire somebody from, say, Marlborough, or from Upton. You would hire somebody that the money was lucrative enough in order to get them to take you up on it, and you would send them off and cover it. Now it was a much more insidious system when the Civil War came around. and there were $300 bounties, and that's a story for another time. So we will not get into that. So now let's see, who else shall we go visit? Well, let's see, who is it? Aha! Well, in memory of John Stone, grandson of the first minister of Holliston. So, and it has likened over so much you can barely read any of it. Now, everybody always wants to know about these here. This would be John Stone. There's another one down here. Who do you think that is that got such an opulent setting? What was it? A lawyer.
Mrs. Stone.
That person down there is James Russell, tavern keeper, because a tavern keeper in town was a very important person, because that's where people gathered to find out all the news. We had the meeting house, but the alternate spot for doing politics and town business and everything was at the tavern. And we had quite a few of them all along this stretch of road, going all the way towards Milford. Of course, there was Littlefield Tavern. There was Russell Tavern, which was right about where the Historical Society is now. In between, Simeon Cutler also had one. And I think that's who I want to go down to visit, is Simeon Cutler. He's down here. He's a really interesting character too. Let's go find him. Yeah, I hope he's resting in peace as much as he can in this location. So Simeon Cutler, as I said, was a tavern keeper, farmer, and also revolutionary soldier. The neat story about him should include his wife, Elizabeth, who is right next to him. And it's kind of nice that maybe the posts are sort of in between them, because they both share a bit of history. Now, the story that we have about him is that he's off to fight the war, and he's in Cambridge. But things were a little bit slow, and he decides he'd sneak back to Hollis and find out how things are doing on the farm. All right? So he arrives at home a little bit late, you know, he snuck out during the night and rode out. Took him quite a few hours to get out here. And he got here, it was dark, family was already in bed, and he goes to open the door to his house. The house is still there on Washington Street. His little side L that is now part of a larger house, but he couldn't get in. Something was up against the door. Couldn't figure out why he couldn't open the door, but he said, okay, the family sleeps in the loft upstairs, so he goes around to the side, and there's a window up there. And he threw a few pebbles up there to wake them up, and his wife sticks her head out of the window, and he says, why can't I open up the door? And she said, oh, there's a whole bunch of Indians sleeping on the floor. Now, the thing is that Mr. Cutler's house is right along the old Indian pathway known as Pout Lane. And a matter of fact, if you go down to the Wenakeening Woods, you can walk a lot of that pathway there, and as you come up onto where the railroad bed is, it is right in direct line with the house. So, now the whole situation does not bother Simeon, because it's happened before, it happens all the time, you know. It's a rather routine occurrence. So he's, okay, fine, all right. So he goes around, gets his ladder, and he goes up and he climbs into the window with the rest of the family upstairs. And they all sleep through the night, and they wait for the Indians to leave and go on their way in the morning, as they did always. And then they were fine. House is empty. Room is available now. And this has happened. It not only happened to them, it happened to the Morse family. We kind of suspect it probably happened to part of Littlefield Tavern, according to a configuration of some doors and things like that. But the thing is, that's Simeon Cutler. So I don't know. I think somebody got Simeon Cutler, didn't you? Yeah, I think you have Simeon Cutler. Yeah. Wow. What did he do? What did he do? It looks like he's got a little.
He was born in 1749.
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Only 49.
49 years old.
Sergeant in Captain Leland's company of Minutemen marched to Cambridge, April 19th, 1775.
Okay. Hey, Frank! Leland's, we heard something about a Captain Leland's company.
Yes, Captain Leland's company. Captain Leland, Captain John Leland, who was captain of the Minute Company.
Yeah.
As Joanne mentioned, there are all sorts of differences. It's a little hard to track some of the military service through.
Yeah.
But Holliston had basically 3 companies of militia. One of them was designated as the Minute Company, the fast response guys. And John Leland was elected captain, and then things happened. Do you want to tell the story, Joanne, or would you like me to?
Oh no, you have slightly more details than I do. Yeah.
We've got some interesting things that have turned
Yeah.
up in the Massachusetts archives.
Yeah.
That Captain Leland was accused of cowardice at the Battle of Bunker Hill for failing to lead his company in the battle.
Yeah.
And there are some documents. We're in the middle of reviewing this, but there's a petition from some of his men asking that Captain Leland be removed from his command, or as it said, not commissionated.
No, commissionated. Yeah, commissionated.
I've heard that word. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because he failed to lead his men into battle at Bunker's Hill. And there's a counter, it is signed by some of the soldiers. And then there's a counter petition, which interestingly enough contains the name and signatures of a number of other Lelands, so probably not surprising, offering reasons why he should not be removed from his command.
Yeah.
There's a letter asking Captain John Stone, who Joanne spoke about, to take their side.
Yeah, right.
There is a petition to the legislature to have him removed. There are a couple of affidavits or from various individuals who supposedly witnessed what he did, and what these individuals said that he did. Again, members of the company said that the day of Bunker Hill, they marched out to Bunker Hill, and Captain Leland marched his men out, and there were shots being fired from the ships of what he referred to as the Cambridge River, which I think he meant the Charles River. But they both used the term Cambridge River, which is interesting. And that Captain Leland determined that it probably wasn't safe to go on. And that he had an officer whom he identified as General Putnam, he identified as General Warren, who told them to go guard the Charlestown landing. Which he did, and then
Joseph Warren.
when they got down there, they watched a soldier nearby from another company have his arm taken off by a cannonball, at which Captain Leland was much surprised. He said it was not safe. And they ran into another officer. Then they ran into General Putnam, who basically told them to get their tails up the hill. And so they in fact arrived at the top of the hill just as everybody else was retreating off.
What timing!
The sounds of things, they got caught up in the retreat.
Yeah.
And as the affidavits say, they didn't see Captain Leland again until he turned up at the head of his company the next day, who asked to be relieved of his command, which they obliged him to do. Apparently he changed his mind and wanted it back. So we're still
Can't make up his
thinking on
mind.
this, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
But more to come on that one. But it's a number of the men who are listed on these various affidavits and on these various petitions to the Honorable Council are the men who are buried here. Some of them are buried
here.
passing the graves of some of the. I think you mentioned Daniel Eames.
Yes, he was one of them.
I think we'll pass
several others.
Who were involved in this controversy.
And we do have here the Ephraim Doolittle Esquire Regiment, which does record there as with John Leland's name is crossed out, and it's interesting to see the name underneath him. And who is that, Frank?
You're asking me to do this without my glasses.
It's Jacob Miller. Jacob Miller.
The missing Jacob.
Yes, Jacob Miller. Yes. Wherever he may be. Yeah. So, so whatever became of John Leland later in life? Yeah. What happened to him? He became a minister. Because
For military life.
no, he was
By
not.
his own admission.
Yes, I think ultimately, yes. Yeah, that's right. And he apparently, the church that he was the minister at, I think was Peru, Mass, I think, way up in the hill country. And I hope he was very happy there.
We shouldn't think, really, it's amusing to read this, but we shouldn't think less of John Lee.
No.
These men, for the most part,
Yeah.
are all going into battle for the first time.
Oh, yeah, they're
I
farmers
like
and
to
workmen,
think,
yeah.
You know, we would all be heroes in the face of something
Face of like that, yeah.
Fire cannons,
Right, yeah.
his arms are flying off.
Yeah.
Next year,
It's a little tough.
we have to wonder how all of us would react. Some of us
right.
have had, there are people who've had the chance to test that. and others
Exactly.
who haven't. I don't know how all we all behave
Yeah.
under similar circumstances.
So we can give a tip of the hat to Simeon and Elizabeth, who was the wife who had to host the Indians on the floor of her home and wait until the morning for them to depart. No, I don't think so. I don't think it was a B&B.
Give us a little more background here. What were the typical relationships like between indigenous people and residents of Holliston?
Particularly here, yeah.
Were there, by the time Holliston was settled, were there not that many native tribes folks left?
No.
What are we looking at?
Well, there was a pathway that meandered along the way from about South Natick, which is famous for their population, and it meandered along the Charles River and overland, and it came through the south part of Holliston by way of about where Bullard Memorial Farm is and along the south side of Holliston. According to records, probably the most significant place that you could see today is the pathways that are inside of Wenakeening Woods in that particular area, and we do know they were there. Pout Lane was the name of it. It was sort of a side path to the Mendon Path. Mendon Path followed pretty much where Route 109 is. And Route 16 did not follow an Indian path. Ours was just south of it. But it was a very common occurrence that the Native Americans, as they were walking along, going from, say, one of their planting fields to a winter settlement to their various spots, they didn't stay in one place. They had several places. There was quite a lot of, marvelous freedom back then. And they would go from place to place following these paths, and there was quite a network of them. Anyway, when night would come on and they would get tired, and once there was more settlement in these parts, they would just pile right into your home and settle down on the floor and sleep there with very little, if any, asking about it, because it was not part of their culture to have to ask to stay in a spot that provided refuge. This was all through Massachusetts and New England. There are many, many stories of it. I have one of my ancestors that had settled in Oxford. Same situation, quite. She was pregnant. The rest of her family was in Marlborough, and at that time, the old meandering roads, it was about 50 miles from Oxford to Marlborough. It's a lot shorter now. But when she was 8.5 months pregnant, she said, I don't want to wait any longer. She got on a horse and rode back to Marlborough to be with family in order to have her baby delivered, because, she said, she did not want to have a bunch of Indians piling into the house while she's in labor. Now, I think about this too. Probably the Native American women would have a lot of good pointers for her as far as their methods of childbirth, and I wonder whether she might have benefited from that.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Was it male and female Native Americans just piling in?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It wasn't
Oh yeah. It was a whole group. Yeah. There was no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was all families that were on the move as well. And the thing is, they had a different attitude about privacy issues and also property issues as well. So that was just something that the people on the frontier had to deal with, and either you dealt with it and got along with it. I mean, it wasn't like it was every week. I mean, it might be a few times a year. that it would happen. But you never, they didn't make reservations. They would just stop in and stay, and they would be out in the morning. Yeah. So, and yes, it did happen in Holliston, and it's kind of like an interesting clash of cultures that we may find to be rather odd or even off-putting, but no, they did not have that same sort of attitude. So, now let's see. Let's go visit somebody else. Anyway, this is Alexander Thayer, the late pastor of the Church of Paxton. Now, what is he doing down here? Why is he buried here and not up in Paxton where he was the minister? Well, the reason, he was a Tory and he was run out of Paxton and he came down here. The Thayer family, there were quite a few of them around, especially in Mendon next door, and towns like Medway and Holliston. And so he found refuge down here, and he died in 1807, so it wasn't like he was run out of town right after either. He settled in. And what the interesting thing about this stone is that right here where his age is, it's indented for the age 67. I have a feeling that perhaps when the stone was done, that the age was incorrect, and the family insisted that it be corrected. So it's not something that you see very often at all. It's a real unusual one. All right, we are going to go that way. Come on this way. Now, we talked about trees also. All right, lovely maple tree here. And what we are going to do is we're going to visit Sara Twitchell. Now, you can't rightly see her too well right now because the tree has grown right around her gravestone. Now, I remember seeing it when it wasn't quite so covered by the tree trunk, and I was able to get her dates. Her name is Sara Twitchell, a young lady, and the tree is protecting her stone. So visit that sometime when you have a chance to see her, kind of running into that tree. And all right, I don't see unfortunately, it's the one with the angel on it, and you can't see it anymore. I was hoping to find another one. We'll find somebody on the way by for the sprightly. She was in her 20s. Yeah, she was young and almost forgotten because the tree is eating her up. So, yes, okay. Okay, well, let's see. For any of you who are knitters, this is Zariah Buzzell, who is the one that was listed as occupation knitter. As you can see, she died 1862 during the Civil War. And so I think this is almost like a come-to shrine for all knitters to stop in and pay a little homage to her. So, but not only is Zariah, she is Audlin Batchelder right up there. That's her brother. That's how she happened to end here. A widow woman living with her brother in town. So I often think about that when I go by. But there's somebody on the opposite side we ought to mention. And he has a lovely post. And, okay, so not only that, I don't think that I put in a slip for him, but I had hoped maybe I can get some kids here to do the math, okay? So, this is Captain Lemuel Leland. He has a beautiful Revolutionary War post next to him. Lovely flag. Now, would anybody like to do the math? Okay, he died 1839 and the age is 59. So give me an estimate as to what year he was born. 1780. Now, I don't know whether he snuck in at 3 years old before the war ended in 1783. I tend to doubt it. And that did kind of confuse me about it, that he has a lovely, beautiful Revolutionary War post there, and yet he was hardly out of diapers at the time. So what do? You do a little research to find out who he is and what he's got and why.
The stones that was fixed, and they had to move all the markers when they fixed the stone.
Maybe. I don't know. It ended up here. What I did find out, though, was he does have a connection to the War of 1812. So, I don't know.Maybe we ought to, get a War of 1812 stone for him. He sold a bunch of guns. He was a gunsmith, and he sold guns to the effort, and he was paid $45 in return for the guns that he procured. So that was his war effort for the War of 1812, which was not a very popular war in Massachusetts or New England, and actually New England was even thinking of seceding from the U.S., but the war luckily ended before they actually got to it. But that is what his legacy is. Now, the thing is that we have found through here in a couple of situations something similar to this, that maybe that should have gone with somebody else, because there are several others who really deserve to have this and they don't. So I think that probably we should go around and take names and find out whether or not that's true. We had one up at that end, a similar situation, a Revolutionary War post, and yet he hadn't even been born by the time of the Revolution. But sometimes these things get moved and they plunk them down in a different spot, and this might be that situation too. Now, yes, I assume that he should get something to commemorate the $45 that he was paid for the guns that went to the war effort for the War of 1812. So Captain Lemuel, enjoy it while you can. So you'll find a few others like that all through the graveyard. Mr. Howe, Isaac Howe, is up there, the one with the flag in front. And also, I do love this one here, the tomb, so to speak. And before the preservation was done, you could barely see this. This was really just barely showing above ground. And they have dug it away, and they found the rocks on the side and everything. It looks way better. Looks way better now. And on it, it lists two people. And it is Asa Fisk and Abner Johnson. Both of them do have a bit of credibility for the war. Now, Asa Fisk is a really interesting family. There were 4 Asa Fisks right from the very beginning in 1724 and right up to the last in 1853. That was when the 3rd Asa Fisk died, and the 4th Asa Fisk hid out for the territory and ended up in San Francisco, where he made a lot of money and lived in a big Victorian house and never came back to Holliston. So, but the Asa Fisks are an interesting bunch, often found in town arguing about roads, for instance. They lived up on North Mill Street, and one of the early road petitions in Holliston was that Asa Fisk wanted a road built from where North Mill is now, cut across the land to link up with what we know as Hollis Street. This is before there was Apprentice Street, because when they drew the lines way back in 1724, he found that the only road out that he would have to go through Hopkinton in order to get around to come to Holliston, and it would have been an all-day's task. So he constantly was asking for them to build a road so I can get out to the rest of Holliston. And you can imagine how long that took. And as you know, He didn't get his road going straight to Hollis Street, but today, notice next time you are stopped at the top of Hollis Street, and if you look straight across towards the left-hand side of properties there, you'll see a stone wall. Well, they thought about it and they started to think about it. They even started to build a little bit of a bridge over Chicken Brook down in the woods somewhere. But you know, bureaucracy grinds slowly. It never got done. They kept putting it off, thinking of some other excuse, and it just didn't get built until they put in Prentice Street and also Mill Street. And finally, maybe one of the Asa Fisks, not the first one, finally had a more direct route to get back to downtown Holliston. So Asa Fisk, well, you know, the tenacity that he displayed was quite impressive. So, and who knew that there was a little tomb that is there? And the thing is, apparently, it wasn't as roomy as the one that was at the South Cemetery. And they filled it all up, and the rest of their relatives had to be buried somewhere else. And that was that. So, you know, either you died soon enough to get in there, or you're on your own. So, but I really like it because having read about Asa Fisk, yeah, it's just a great story. It's a marvelous story. So, anyway, what I want to do now is ask if anybody has any questions, anything you're curious about, anything you'd like to know about this burying ground, or even anybody in it.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm just questioning. Nowadays, when we purchase a stone,
Yeah.
and it's
Okay.
like you're paying per letter to have it engraved.
Yeah.
What do they do? Like, that's why I'm wondering if that's why women do not have much written on their stones, if they were being prejudiced against.
Well, now that is a good question.
Yep.
Because yes, women tended to get less publicity. Matter of fact, Frank he uncovered one stone very much in that same line. And he sent me a picture of it. I'm going, oh my gosh. Matter of fact, it's a good question to ask because it has to do with Asa Fisk. All right, now, this is a stone that is up at the West Cemetery. And the stone says on it, it says at the top, Mrs. Asa Fisk, former wife of Nathan Leland, and then born, died, nothing else, no first name.
Yeah.
Who is she?
Yeah.
So, and so the thing is, I'm starting to look around and see if I can see any others. There is the one down there, Alethea Parkman, for example, also, and she's one of the larger stones down there. And in it, it has her name, but it says also, wife of Elias Parkman, and then daughter, and it goes in this whole biography about her father. But what about Alethea? Yes, they do get a little bit of a short shrift on it. Every now and then a woman might get a really nice big stone and everything, but no, it was very often, sometimes all the wives, first wife and second wife will be buried on the same, under the same stone. And it makes you feel kind of bad about that. I mean, and yes, that is something to look out for, to see just how the women were handled next to, the opulent stones that many oftentimes were for men. Yeah, it is quite an interesting thing, and it has to do with culture and all of that.
Didn't you find out who Mrs. Asa Fisk actually
Yes,
was?
we did find out who she was. Yeah. Yes, she was Ruth Parker. And Ruth Parker, she was from Framingham, which actually, up until 1846, Holliston bordered on Framingham. So we were very close by. And 3 towns, of course, made up Ashland in 1846, and it took parts of all 3 towns. Yeah. So anyway, Ruth Parker, and then looking up her background and everything, she was the daughter of John Parker. Okay, fine. Then he was the son of Peter Parker, and his claim to fame was that he was struck by lightning and survived. I know. Yeah. But yes, Ruth Parker is her name. So if you go up there to that stone, say hello, Ruth Parker. Yeah, it is. It's ironic the way that a lot of the women, and a lot of times you barely got any details about their lives at all, and you have to go look it up. And luckily, the way that history records are now, we were able to do that. Yeah. So. If you come across any of the other ones, let us know. You don't get opulent, beautiful stones a lot of times, but there are, as we say, there's a story behind every stone, and that was one that kind of of all the burying grounds in Holliston, this of course is the biggest, and we could say the best, but my favorite is the North Cemetery on Cedar Street. And there are a lot of interesting people buried in that little cemetery. But also, what is so valuable about that cemetery is that is where the town buried the paupers. And we have a short list of them. We don't know all of them because there you go. You have another situation of lost and forgotten people. But we do have a list of some of them.
No, I would have thought right across the street, because there was the poorhouse down on
Washington.
Yes, I would have thought they'd be across the street.
Yes, well, a few of them are there, but that was 1892.
Okay.
The Holliston's Poor Farm from like 1829 up until 1892 was located in Ashland. Even before it was Ashland, it was Holliston, but in 1846, Holliston was not very thrilled about having to hand over all that land. And you look at 1875 maps of Ashland, and you find this little square where the Poor Farm for Holliston is, and that was still considered to be town of Holliston property in that little block in the middle of Ashland. And the town, they would bring it up at town meetings and see if it is of the interest to people to move the Poor Farm to within the environs of Holliston. Yeah. They never got around to it till the 1890s. Okay. Yeah, and that is why. And that little graveyard there, of course, was just around the corner from where the old Poor Farm was. But it is really, it's interesting, very sad to see who is buried there, because we look at the Revolutionary War soldiers here. There are a few paupers who were Revolutionary War soldiers. No markers, no nothing. And they have all but been forgotten, which we also are trying to do something to remember them. There's James Johnson, who is buried there as a pauper. His wife was later buried there as a pauper. There are a couple of military issue stones there that had been added, but it looks as though we probably need a few more. The last surviving Revolutionary War veteran is buried in that cemetery. Yeah, so it's a real interesting thing. Every one of these little cemeteries have a lot of interesting things in it. And also, for any of you, if you can find Jacob Miller, let me know. I know. He died. Yeah. Yeah. So what are we going to do? We have to find him somehow. Yeah.
Are these cemeteries closed? Can anybody ask to be buried in?
I don't know that. James, step forward.
I had because I have no.
Oh yeah, you do. Oh yeah. Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah.
Can anybody be buried in these 5 cemeteries now?
Yeah. What is it?
I mean, technically, the town is responsible for them, but I think if you petition the select board,
yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
If there's space,
Yeah.
I don't see why.
Yeah.
Cedar Street.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Cedar Street
yeah.
is still active. So
Yeah, perhaps.
Go to the town.
Yeah.
The town is
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there's one lonely grave that is way up in the back, all by itself, and it is John McKinnon, and he was buried here in like 1913, I think it was about that time. No other family around it. It's just a lonely stone up there. And of course, I was curious, who was he and why is he up there all alone and with nobody else around him? And you can go visit him. He's up back there. I looked him up. He had married a woman from Holliston, so there was the connection. They were living in Boston. He died in an industrial accident when they were doing renovations on the SS Pierce building in Boston. And he was killed. She brought him out here to be buried. She stayed with family for a couple of years. She had a son born after his death named John McKinnon Jr. And a few years later, she married a man and moved to Maine, and probably, who knows if she ever came back. And I just find that so lonely up there, that there he is all alone. And so stop by and visit him, and give him a tip of your hat too, because he does look lonely up there. So, and there are others too. Way up back there, you can see two stones almost up against the stone wall. They're two tall rectangular ones, and they're facing the other way. I have no idea why. They're sisters, and they were from, I think they were from Rutland, Mass. And one of them was betrothed to a man named Lucian Prince. She died of consumption before they were married. So what does Lucian do? He looks around. Hey, she's got a sister. So he marries her, and she dies 3 months later of consumption and is buried next to her sister. And I have no idea why those two stones are facing that way. It just is odd, whether or not the stone wall was reconfigured, I have no idea, but there's only a couple of the stones like that that are facing the opposite direction. So it's kind of interesting. Huh?
Did they sneak them in?
It was not at a time that they would have. Yeah, this is 1840s, 1849. Yeah, so it's one of those oddball anomalies, and then McKinnon is behind that tall white one, and McKinnon is right behind there, all alone. Yeah, it's interesting. Yes.
They're restoring, I believe there was a group of stones over here. Some were facing the woods, and I think when they restored the cemetery, they turned them, some face Washington Street and some face the woods.
Well, some face the woods, and they still do, yeah. There's some of them.
Some they turn around.
I hope so. Well, I should have snuck in and asked them to turn those. I never got around to that, so I never did. Yeah. So I mean, we're nearing the end of this anyway. But what I want to say is, I invite all of you to take a walk Sunday afternoon, walk through the graveyard, see what we have here, and look at them. And look, curiosity will spike some interest in you to maybe look a little deeper as to who they are. In the way that today's records are more available than they ever used to be, when Frank had said to me about poor Ruth Parker, and also about John Leland, I've been trying to find him. The problem with the John Leland was that he became a minister in the upcountry. There was another John Leland, a minister, also kicking around there at the same time, causing us a lot of trouble to separate the two of them. So that other John Leland apparently was a great fan of Thomas Jefferson, and in 1801 sent him a giant cheese from Cheshire, Mass. But and his whole story is on the internet. You can find it. But our John Leland has kind of sunken beneath the historical waves and it's less easy to find. But there are many others in here. Of course, one that we're going to walk down for the last one, because we have to throw in a Civil War veteran on our way out. The white stones are military or government issue, which you can still do today. Recently, we just added a couple more down at Lake Grove of military issue stones, especially when they either didn't have one or they were deteriorated. So anyway, Silas T. Cobb. Now this is somebody that you can also find on the internet. A rather sad story. When you hear about John Wilkes Booth and how he escaped from Washington, D.C. after he shot Lincoln, he approached the sentry that was at the Anacostia Bridge and had to talk his way through because it was after the hour. They had shut down the bridge. And I guess he was a smooth talker because he was an actor and everything, and he got across. So poor Silas is blamed with letting John Wilkes Booth out of D.C. after the assassination. So now what happened to poor Silas? Well, after the war, he did as many young men did. He and a friend lit out for the territory and went west, probably to see about, getting a piece of land which was offered to a lot of veterans and everything. So he and his friend were on a ferry boat crossing a river in Michigan. The boat capsized and they drowned. So talk about tragedy after tragedy. Yeah. So it's a sad day there. So that's Silas T. Cobb. There is one other Sewell Fisk that you can see over there, but we won't get into it. His story is way too long for today. But those are basically the most important Civil War era people. We also have Elbridge Jefferson Cutler, who was called the foremost poet of the Civil War era. Well, I have to kind of debate that, but we'll let him have it. So anyway, so why don't we all head back and we can do a debriefing. There's Ephraim Littlefield Jr., who is buried at the South Cemetery, and what's interesting about him is he was on that Tory list. He has a veterans post and all, but he inherited the tavern from his father, Ephraim Sr. So that was 1778 when the father died. Who stops by in 1789 to Littlefield Tavern, where he happened to be the tavern keeper that year? George Washington. So, I'm thinking, George comes in and I said, do you think maybe they talked over, traded war stories?
And is that with the Balancing Rock? Is that when he went by?
Yes, supposedly, the rumor has it, or the joke is that whatever Mr. Littlefield gave him to drink, did that cause him to be a little bit frisky and a little bit loose, so to speak, to go and try to push the stone over? Well, who knows? But then I think about it, my gosh, the irony of it, here is a young man that was on the Tory list, did that 1 week down to Rhode Island in 1780, I believe it was after his father died, so I guess he was off the hook there, and then later he hosts George Washington at the tavern. Interesting. Interesting. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We just wanted to thank everyone so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
A reminder that we do things that are very distinct from the Historical Society.
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome to hang out and ask questions, but we're officially done. You can go on and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.